at any stage along the way. Okay,
George,
I am done.
You answer Kim's question. That's what I was going to ask you to do. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi, I loved the talk. I thought it was very inspiring, and I really liked your teaching sequence, and I wish I could have taken a course from you. However, I'd like to take issue with your very first bullet on your very first slide, where you said students come to us knowing nothing about feedback loops in human affairs. I think that's not true. I think that they actually have a strong and important lived experience with things like escalation between hostilities, and maybe with the poor get poorer and the rich get richer, and maybe with cutting down the tall poppies, stuck in a loop kind of a thing. I think they have a strong a strong intuitive experience with feedback loops in human affairs. I think we also see it in folklore, like the Wendigo myth in of the, well, I don't want to get involved in that, but I think it's deeply embedded in folklore and also in children's experience and the experience of youth. And I think we should be trying to tap into that and extract it and bring it forward rather than dismiss it.
You're absolutely right. What I meant by that was they haven't drawn those insights as loops. In fact, in the history of feedback thought, if you're really interested, you can go back and take a look at the book I wrote on that topic. People were thinking like this from Plato on, and maybe before Plato. And in the 1700s, the great economists were all thinking feedback loops. The invisible hand of Adam Smith is a bunch of feedback loops. They didn't draw the pictures. The pictures weren't drawn until the 20th century, when the engineers had to draw pictures about feedback loops to create high fidelity amplifiers and circuits. And so what I meant by that was people aren't used to thinking of these things they know well as things that actually are a kind of circular thought. Mm-hmm. I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of us understand that stuff, but what you're about to, or what you are doing with your kids, is saying there is a pattern of thought here in which thoughts go in circles, and there's only two kinds. There's a reinforcing kind and there's a balancing kind. And you can go back to Adam Smith and read through everything those guys said, and there'll still be only two kinds. And we know what they are, and we can teach that way of thinking. Thank you. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I think that it would be good for us to talk sometime about, what are the methodologies of bringing forward those lived experiences that students do come to us with.
I think it would be great. In fact, imagine having a conversation among this set of people in which we all tried to identify things that are loopy that our kids already know.
Mm. Thank you.
I don't think I could do that, but, well, all of my ideas are loopy, but that's a different story. I think imagine exploding a list like that, because you guys could then invent pedagogical efforts that would expand on those ideas that the kids intuitively have. And then the kids are going to realize, son of a gun, there's a pattern of thought here. It's a great, thank you. That's really good. Ben.
Oh, you did a good job there, but can you elaborate a little more, George, on the idea of what makes a good model and a good feedback loop model? You said it, but can you elaborate more on that? Does it have anything to do with the endogenous and exogenous characteristic you were talking about?
Yes, I think it does. There's one of the things I saw in some work of students, well, there was the causal mishmash stuff that you saw, and you wouldn't be able to write equations. A model ends up having to capture those things in arithmetic. And there has to be an equation for that. So a well-structured system dynamics model has, let's say, expressions or quantities in it that you can write arithmetic for. That's not necessary in a feedback in a causal loop diagram or just a general map, but it is essential in a well-formulated model. Secondly, a well-formulated model really does have pressures emanating from stocks, eventually around feedback loops to flows. All of our models have that character. This one does. Let me go ahead to the other one. This, yeah, so we got two. So same thing here. And your comment having to do with endogeneity, that's, to me, that's our gift to the world. When Forrester first thought of using what he knew, using computers to help management, that's what he came to the Sloan School of Management for. He saw that there were all kinds of people doing great things with computing, a lot of statistical stuff and econometrics and stuff. And he said to himself and to others, I suppose, hey, nobody's doing the stuff that feedback engineers, servo mechanisms engineers know, that the really interesting dynamics that pop up in electrical systems are when things are going terribly wrong. And they go terribly wrong because of the wrong signal getting to the wrong place at the wrong time. And so Forrester's earliest stuff says, begin by drawing a closed causal boundary around the system and derive the dynamics from, can I get the dynamics? Yeah, derive the dynamics from the internal working of the system. When I first started reading about systems theory, nobody else said that. They said, if you want to think about something, think about everything. Forrester said, no, draw a boundary around your system, derive the dynamics you're interested in from the internal workings of the system. Urban decay, derive urban decay from the internal workings of a city. That's what he did in urban dynamics. That's what was so remarkable about it. Mm-hmm. Everybody else said, Jay, you're wrong because it's suburbs sucking the lifeblood out of cities. Jay said, no, draw a boundary around the city. And from that, he got urban renewal policies that actually work. So I think you're kind of ahead with your question. If we can get kids to build models that just look like the ones that I've shown you, we're halfway there. And then we can layer on the notion, this very sophisticated notion that you derive dynamics from the internal workings of the system. That's where we're really earning our keep.
George, one last part to that. you said that water flow circular one, the stock and flow diagram, was not a good model. Why was it not a good model?
Well, first of all, it's a map, not a model.
It's well, the stock flow in a circle evaporation, and you said this is not a good model.
Hang on just a second. I got to go back to, I don't know.
Your first stock and flow.
The one on the right?
No, it was a stock and flow diagram where you showed both of them and you said this was not a good model. Keep going.
Oh, yes, I know what you mean. Okay.
Not yet.
I wrote that because Diana kept writing to me saying, George, you got a mistake here. George, you got another mistake over here.
Right here.
Yeah.
You said this is not, why would I show a student that this is not a good model?
This is a good model. There's nothing wrong with it, except, of course, there's no links, no telling us where evaporation comes from. So we don't have the causal structure here. What did I say? I said it's not a feedback loop because it's not cause that is feeding around, it's water that's flowing. I didn't mean to say this is not a good diagram.
Okay.
And it's not reinforcing because you don't get more water. It's a good, in fact, if you're going to build a model of climate stuff, you would have a thing that looks like this with another stock for water in ice and water in the oceans. And I built that. You would actually have a conserved flow of water. We don't grow more water. So there's actually not a reinforcing loop that says we get more water in our Earth, atmosphere, ocean system.
This would be a closed system, right?
That's right. Did I get it? Is that all right?
Thank you.
Yep, there's nothing wrong with that. Some people might prefer, with the level of kids they're working with or whatever, to draw a picture that looks like this. In order for the kids to see the stocks, you'll have to put the boxes in somehow. But to many people, this looks easier on the eye than that does, but they mean the same thing.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
I use that with students.
Len has his hand up. Marcella has her hand up. I don't know Marcella. Len, can I ask you to wait and so I can hear from Marcella?
No problem.
I didn't mean to jump ahead or anything because I saw Diana has her hand up too.
But we're not going to allow Diana to ask any questions because I won't be able to answer them.
Hi.
Go ahead.
So I teach undergraduates and I teach them usually causal modeling because that's all I have time for. And I'm working on trying to get another class. So with like systems dynamics. So this is all, I'm still very much trying to learn how to teach all of this.
May I interrupt for just one tiny little thought? Yeah. It would be good if all of us drew a distinction between a picture and something you can simulate. Now, for me, with my students, pictures are maps. Something I can simulate is a model. And you might want to draw that distinction because what you're really doing is teaching your students probably really good causal mapping.
Yeah, actually, that's a helpful distinction to make.
It's, and moving the next step requires doing lots of the things that were in this talk.
So one of the questions I had though, just what you had up, where you have the model of the condensation. So you have the stock and flow, and then you have, I guess, the causal map.
Yeah.
So you said that's not like a reinforcing feedback loop because you're not getting more, but the way I guess I would have approached it, and I'm not sure if it's the best way to do this, would be kind of like have a balancing loop that talks about like water available, like, you know, like the number of water molecules available or something like that, that connects to this, so that to show that there's limits to how much this reinforcing loop could grow. So at least I would have considered this to be a reinforcing loop, and I would have added a balancing loop to it to show that there's limits to how much water or precipitation that you could get. Is that a correct way to map it? Because I was like, I just found it, I guess I wouldn't have told students that this wasn't a reinforcing loop based on what it,
Well, I deliberately chose this example to blow up some ideas people may have in their heads. It is the thing you have to see in a picture like this is that water is flowing around. And you could start with all of it in the atmosphere, none of it on the ground. And it would condense into clouds and it would precipitate and we'd get some water on the ground. But that would be a transfer from the atmosphere to the ground and the ocean eventually, of course. And this is transferring, 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 transferring. It's not growing. And the limit comes from, in fact, think about it. If I had a gallon in here and a gallon in there and a gallon in there, I've got 3 gallons and it's just moving around. I never have 4 gallons. I never have 2 gallons. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
You get to say no. That's okay. I would not, it's not as if there is a balancing loop. We would probably want to impose a balancing loop if we had the idea that something was growing up to a limit imposed by the balancing loop, the total water in our universe.
George?
Yes.
If you let the water in the ground seep out so it takes water out of the cycle, would that make it a good one?
Where would it go?
Into the ground.
That's where it is. It's in the ground.
No, below the ground, into the earth.
You would, by the way, remember, I didn't say this is a bad model or a bad picture. What I'm trying to do is get you to see that these are stocks. These are stocks.
I understand.
And it's just water moving around. Now, if you wanted to say there's some water in the deep ground, I'd add another stock for that. And water could seep into that.
Yeah.
And then probably seep back into surface water and evaporate. Or it might seep into deep water and just stay there, I suppose. Yeah. The one that we're used to is water in oceans tends to freeze into ice, and the ice thaws and it comes back into water in bodies of water, and that can evaporate and so on. I have a sense that I'm not reaching you, and if I'm not, let me suggest here. Oh, I didn't. I meant to put my email address. What I wanted to end with was, you can send me a question or a comment on any of this, and I'll respond to all of you, all 165 of you. It may take a while, but you're...
May I put your email in?
Oh, please, yeah.
Chat? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Put gpr@albany.edu. And you might use a common subject like a teaching workshop or whatever Diana calls these things, so that they all come up in the same place for me. And let me stop talking and go to, hi, Paul, it's lovely to see you. Len, you had your hand up a long time ago.
George, you already answered my question. You flipped past the slide. I wanted to encourage everybody to go to the System Dynamics Review and see the 3 articles you wrote and also get the models.
Yeah.
And if anybody wants them in the best software, which is PowerSim Studio, they just need to send me a message.
Oh boy.
Len, we are going to upload George's previous working documents for these notes, which he can allow to have available to everyone.
Okay.
We will upload that as well as his slides underneath the recording for the System Dynamics Society pre-college SIG, which I put in the link, I think. This will all be available to you probably within a couple of days.
Okay, Diane, I will send you, I've translated them all to Studio because that's what I use George's method in teaching, and I'll throw them up there.
Now, don't, be careful about that because I am really hoping that every one of you will invent a copying a model exercise that will go from something to Stella or I think or whatever you use. You should all do that so you can see what's going on, and you should ask your students to try to do that. So don't give too many answers there, Len.
Sure. Well, now that you said that, if anybody wants to help me translate old Dynamo into Stella and Vensim.
Yeah, that's where I was. Can I go to Paul? Because Kim, you already spoke.
Wait. I have some questions in the chat. These are not my questions, but there are some questions in the chat people have long ago asked. And I'm trying to get into their questions. Yeah. Okay, so Joseph Ching asks, how would you describe a CLD that is considered a well-structured model?
That is a great question. Sorry. Stop. Let me see what I've got showing on my screen here. I wish I had prepped something like that. Here's what you're looking for. Causal loop diagrams, maps, are best used telling stories. They can't prove anything. They can't justify dynamics. You don't even know if a loop you've drawn oscillates or something. So the tests of good maps are, can the students tell a story about each loop? Can they tell a story about 2 loops stuck together? See, there's this, we're discovering petroleum, but we're running out of petroleum underground, and that's a balancing loop, and that's going to cause our ability to discover more petroleum to decline. You'd like students to be able to tell stories like that just from the map. Now, what that means ultimately is that a really good map is Well, I want to say they're not too complicated, but I've drawn some pretty complicated maps. I've gotten around the fact that they're too complicated by just showing a little piece and telling the story about that little piece, and then adding another little piece that starts to add on more of the story. So I'd say it's the ability to tell stories. It's the ability to start with something so simple that anybody listening to you and seeing the map can understand. And if you want to get to something pretty complicated, you unfold it. You add links and loops and keep telling new stories as you go. Now, I do have a really good example of a thing like that I could send. And it gets too complicated. I want you to know that. The other thing that, good mappers would not like what I'm about to say. When I'm trying to draw good causal loop diagrams, I'm thinking like a modeler. So I am. So I'm frequently thinking about what are the units of that, which you don't have to think about in a map. I'm sometimes thinking about what would that equation actually look like? So starting in the direction of thinking quantitatively is probably really valuable for people at the advanced stages of mapping. Am I answering your question?
I don't know if he's still here. Joseph Ching, are you still with us? One thing that you always said, George, is to identify the stocks in your causal loop diagrams. Draw boxes around the stocks.
This is controversial. I've been saying it for about 15 years. A lot of the K-12 folks out of sort of Arizona and stuff have been doing this. You see, there was a hint in this presentation of why I think that's so important. Stocks are actually the pressure that builds dynamics. It's in the accumulations that we get the pressures that cause change. And if you leave stocks out of maps, you've left out that part. And I think we're in the business of trying to help people really see what's going on. And accumulations are part of what's going on. So that's why I want them in there. Now, a lot of people don't want to do that. And I have several feedback loop maps that I love. I love the maps that come out of Robert King Merton's article on self-fulfilling prophecy and what he wrote about prejudice. Not only does he have the simple prejudice loop that I gave, but then he has another, and it's all in language, not in pictures, but he also has a loop which he characterizes that the minority gets it coming and going. The minority can't fix its prejudicial situation by doing better because the majority will think those guys are uppity and don't belong. And so there's a feedback loop of the minority not belonging. And I show those, that the two, the little one and the one with the bigger loop, with no stocks, because you don't need them. You can tell a story without it. And if you can do that, do it. But a lot of times you need the stocks. And I'll be happy, by the way, any of these examples that I'm giving by word of mouth, I'll be happy to send to people if I have the complete list of all of you.
And Ray, we will have everyone's email, won't we?
Yes, I think so. When they're registering, they should have
Okay.
My God, there's Brad Morrison at the bottom. Hello.
I know. George, can you come back to me after you go to another person?
Sure, yes. Paul Newton was, it's lovely to see Paul.
Well, no, I think other people were asking questions in the chat before me, so I think maybe there probably
I'll come back. I'm looking for the other questions, so it'll give me a chance to find the next one.
You want me to go ahead, Diana?
Yeah, go ahead, and then just come back to me after you.
All right, George, can you go back to slide 16? I want to talk more about the water flows, and I've got a question for you that I put in the chat, but I'll say it. Yeah. So
by the way,
go to the next slide. Maybe it's 17.
Hang on just a second. In case you don't know how I did that in PowerPoint, you just type the number of the slide and hit return.
Go to the next slide, George. I want to you got a statement down at the bottom. No, back to oh no, it's system with the it's still 16, but you've got the 16 totally revealed. Yeah.
I'm confused, Paul.
Go back to 16 and
hit the space bar.
There's a statement below that says this is the feedback loop.
That's it.
And I agree that what you're saying here, it's not a feedback loop. However, if you make a little change to this, for example, if each stock has an influence or has a causal influence on each of its outflows, would you not then have a feedback loop?
Oh, you certainly would. Oh, yeah. The minute you start drawing causal influences here, you got feedback loops all over the place.
And it would be a reinforcing loop, because I think water vapor and atmosphere does influence condensation. The more clouds you have, the more precipitation you have, maybe. The more water on the ground you have, the more evaporation you have.
All of that is true, but in fact, you don't get more water.
I didn't say you got more water. I'm just saying you've got a feedback loop.
But it cannot be a reinforcing loop.
Well, if each of the causal relations is a positive relation, then it would be a positive feedback loop. Yeah, Brad just put in the text with zero gain.
Gentlemen, both you guys are thinking at another level than I wanted us to be thinking. I wanted people to realize.
You're just about showing that this is a conserved flow. That's what you're talking about.
Right. That it is flow system. What I got when I was in St. Louis was the diagram on the left turned into the diagram on the right, and they called it a reinforcing loop, which would mean you get more and more and more water. I wanted people to realize that it's flows among stocks, so it's not a reinforcing loop. It's simply water moving around.
Yeah.
That's the point of this part.
Yeah.
And if everybody's got that, that's all I want.
And somebody just put in the chat saying it's a closed system. Would that be a correct statement, George?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That was my question. I just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's good. All right, where are we, Diana?
Next question from the chat.
Kim is still
waiting.
I didn't answer it right the last time, so Kim is going to get me to do it right.
Would you like the question from the chat?
Sure.
Okay. Vanessa Perez says, thanks, George, very insightful. I am working on embedding system dynamics in the National Health Service in England. The students in my case are usually data analysts with no proper modeling experience, but a whole lot of experience in health. Would you suggest any change to the teaching plan in that case?
Oh, that's a great question. Let me go back to this. Oh, wait a minute. Let's see. I want. Sorry. I should be able to jump around here just like nothing, and I'm not. All right, this is what we are talking about. Now, the beauty of your situation, trying to take people who know a ton about the healthcare system, is that the models, if you actually want to get them to understand models, you would start with models that you'd probably build, or you'd get any of your system dynamics modeling friends in the UK to help you build. And you would give your students this exercise. You'd stand in front of them projecting some simple model that's definitely about healthcare, and you change parameters and you'd play with it, and they would understand A, what a model looks like, and B, how you play with them and learn something. Do you want people to actually learn how to build models?
Oh, let's go back. Who's the person?
Yes, I do. Yeah, thank you, George. Yeah.
Okay, then you'd pretty much copy this sequence. Then you'd give them a simple model in, I don't care, Vensim, say, or Lens Power Sim or something, and you give them all the equations and you tell them, write this up in Stella or whatever language you're using. They would do that, and they don't have to know anything. All they have to do is copy. And they'd get into some difficulties and they'd learn a ton. This is actually one of the biggest, you know how kids learn the most in their lives between 1 and 3? The greatest percentage increase in capability occurs in that. I think in this entire sequence I've laid out, this copying exercise has the greatest change in students. They're going to see stuff doing that. And then again, you could pick an epidemic model or something that has a boo-boo in it, and it doesn't behave the way an epidemic should, and they can try to correct and improve it. They could have a model. By the way, we did some work in the UK on the swamping of hair in the Borders region for aged and disabled people. Because Scotland at the time we were there had better systems than England had, and people were coming over the border. There are models like that you could talk about. And you might leave out one of my steps, not thinking that it's useful. I have a reason why I put all of them in. Eventually you're going to, well, I don't know. Maybe I should just stop talking. I'd say the biggest thing is to pick models that are about things those people are deeply interested in. Then you can do any of this. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. We are doing some of those steps. I think there are others that I would incorporate in the way we are working. But yeah, generally, we're doing some of them, not in the same order you put it in there, but yeah, it gives me more structure to what we are doing. Thank you so much.
Sure. By the way, I should mention that I've given talks like this. I gave it to our Thursday group that gets together, and there was a question that said from a very experienced modeler, mapper, member of our field. She likes to give her students a challenge. build a model is the first thing they do. I don't. And I really wanted my students to be able to do whatever I asked them to do when I asked them. And that's why I say it's based on success. The first things I give them, copy this model. All they have to do is read the equations over here and type them in over there. They can do that, and I want my students to have that success. I have had situations in which people walk into my class, and maybe it was before I had this well thought out structure, where students after 3 hours said, "Oh, that's ridiculous. I'm never going to be able to do that." And they never show up again. No, I want to bring them along. And there are other people who, well, I think John Sturman is one of the great teachers in our field. And John Sturman probably does not do it this way. He's working with MIT students and he whacks them right beside the head. Pow! The minute they walk in there and they know they've been set back on their heels, and John Sturman knows more than they do, and they just jolly well are going to catch up. That's not the way I do it.
That's the MIT fire hose protocol.
So can we have a question from Kim, and then can you come back to me, George?
No.
Oh.
yes, we can. Go ahead, Kim, please.
Thank you for entertaining a second question. So my question emerges from your model of the growth of the number of students studying systems dynamics, which is an interesting prospect. So I think that we probably might all agree that we are not on a trajectory where every young person in America is going to experience your full 4-step see, play, think, do teaching sequence, bringing them to the point where they can do systems dynamics modeling. But can you offer a suggestion for what you think is both realistic and useful and desirable as for a level of mastery that we could realistically aspire to for every young person in America to reach by the time they graduate from high school? So what would be a subset of your teaching goals that would be realistic to aspire for as a nationwide capacity for young people to achieve?
I would, oops, did I just kill it? There.
Okay, we don't need the diagrams. I think this answer will have to come out of your head rather than from a slide, so.
Well, I wanted to draw the line. God damn, I can't do it. All right, I'll just, you see where think is? I would tend to stop there. That is to say,
you're going to have to show us something, George, because we can't see anything but everybody else.
Oh, I see. I see what has happened. I thought I was in share screen. Thank you, sorry. I think you could do the first 2 levels.
Okay,
see and play.
Okay, add structure to an existing model.
Because, and they wouldn't necessarily have to do that. That's heading in the direction of being able to write equations that they hadn't thought about before. But being able to play with a model, copy a model teaches a lot. Modeling a canned description. By the way, this guy, this is what students hated in Algebra 1. People have a terrible time turning text into arithmetic. And in our context, they have a little help because we have a diagram that can help them, you know, they can be building a diagram that helps. But I'd probably take them up to modeling a canned model description. Now, along the way, let me emphasize what's going on. When, let me go back to, darn. Okay, never mind. When I start my class, I often use the Kaibob structure. And maybe that is here. Yes, it is here. Okay. This guy, this little model here, and I've projected it. The Kaibob model has the property that you go through exercises like the deer, by the way, have grown way beyond bounds and they overeat everything and collapse. And how do you fix that? Well, one possibility is you let the hunters loose on the deer and you harvest deer. And so one possibility is they harvest 1,000 deer a year. Now in the base run, the deer peak at 100,000. When you're harvesting 10,000 deer a year, they peak at 9,300. How come? Why you were killing off 10,000 deer a year? Why don't they peak at 9,000? So I asked the students that in the middle of this exercise, where all we're doing is fiddling around with the model. And let's see if I can enlarge this guy. A student almost always says, okay, so we're killing off the deer at 1,000 a year for 10 years, 10,000 ought to be gone, but they're not. Only 7,000 are gone. What happened? Some student points out that your policy has made the deer population a little bit smaller, which means there's a little more food per deer. So the deer grow faster and you get a compensating loop. Now look, this is my first class. And in my first class, I alert them to the fact that feedback systems can do that. And they've actually seen the simulation. They went in killing off 10,000 deer, and the peak was not 100,000 minus 10,000. It was something less, and the reason was this compensating loop. Now, what that means, I'm trying to speak to the woman who asked this question. Was it Kim?
It was me, yes.
No. There you are, playing, exploring, and you can pull out a deep insight that people might not get unless you deliberately build it in. They might not ever get playing with models. But as you're exercising models, you can design it so they see those things. Same thing, well, this is the best place for that sort of thing to occur. Anytime you're playing with a model, there's the opportunity that there's an insight in there that you can talk about. And we had it here with, remember when I said, no, that's not what I want. I'm sorry. I said, one of the insights here was that the students got some idea of endogenous thinking because nobody told the students to leave.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that?
Yeah.
That the reason the system, we got fewer students. Oh, darn. The reason we got fewer students was endogenous.
Yes.
And there it is. That's the first picture I could show students. And I could say that. I could point it out. Look at that. The system is doing it to itself. Yeah. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I really appreciate your answer, and I find it really interesting. I had a different answer to my own question, which was that we should be aspiring to get every young people in America to do what so that they could do what you said earlier, which is to tell a story about a causal loop diagram, to draw a causal loop diagram and tell its story, and go back and forth from the narrative to the diagram, or the diagram to the narrative. And the reason I thought that that might be more achievable is because you could put it into a health class, or a diversity, equity, and inclusion class, or an environmental science class, or other classes that were already teaching things. So anyway, I appreciate your thoughts.
But your answer is terrific. I would like to add to your answer. Your students who get to that level of mapping and telling stories should have played with at least one or two simulatable models, because it's only the simulatable ones that smack them in the face. You know, this model I showed about students and teachers has the whole thing collapsing. Now, most people aren't going to see that in the loops. But after they've seen it simulated, then they can tell the story. And you want your students to have one or two experiences like that. Mm-hmm. After that, they can go off and draw maps for the rest of their life.
Thank you.
How are we doing?
We still have more questions.
Keep going.
Okay. This is a statement. John Murphy says, great teaching insights. Have students watch one, play one, do one. Okay, now here's a question. Derek Taylor, has anyone used system dynamics to model renewable energy systems, also local energy networks, wind turbines, energy in buildings?
Answer is yes. The best place to find anything like that is to go to the System Dynamics Society, pull up the System Dynamics bibliography, which is in some zippy spreadsheet form called Airtable that I have not been able to fathom yet, but maybe you can. And you can find, there's probably now more than 14,000 references in there, some of which are published, and you can limit your search to journals, books. Some of which are in conference proceedings. You could look for those. So you can type in a keyword like renewable resources, and you're going to get 273 references, of which 240 are useless because they're beginning studies or whatever, but some might have something that you can use to help. So the answer is absolutely yes. And if you stop to think about it, the world dynamics and limits to growth studies are partly about renewable resources. World limits to growth actually added renewable resources. World dynamics just had natural resources. So you can actually play with world dynamics and get your students to interpret natural resources as partly renewable and partly not, and then fiddle with the parameters so you get a chance to get the renewable resources to be the primary use. or you could even add a little structure. There's a lot done in our field that covers things we want to talk about, and limits to growth and world dynamics is one of them. Incidentally, I'm going beyond my script, but the Sierra Club has just caved in to the movement for what you might call kind speech or people first speech. And the Sierra Club has decided to stop its emphasis on our concern about overpopulation, carrying capacity, limits to growth, tragedy of the commons. They will not use that language anymore. And I think that, and I understand, if you're talking to people in third world countries that the world is overpopulated, those people may feel you're just targeting them. You don't want them to have their share of the pie. I get that. But at the same time, I think I could say my entire modeling life has, part of it's been grounded on population as the source of our problems. And the Sierra Club has given up on that. That's a disaster, in my opinion, in current 21st century human thought. And I just thought I'd let you know. All right.
I believe Emre is next, and then if you will come back to me.
Sure. Hi, Emre.
Hi. About that water cycle model.
No.
I wonder if that might be a solution, because I try to think of I try to define any flow as a balancing loop. Each and every stock flow is in itself, by definition, is a balancing loop, because from one stock to the other stock, when that one stock one make stock two to increase, but that the same increase just make stock one decrease. So the links in the school are okay, but they are not enough. They lack the other ones, the balancing loop ones. Before this one, like
after, I think.
Yeah. Oh, this is perfect. Okay, but if we come to the one that looks like a causal loop diagram, if we want to keep that as a causal loop diagram, we should, before this slide, I think
these are just the two.
No, the 17th slide. No. Before that, the 16th, then before that, and before that, and this one. Well, not even that one. The first one, the one that you just picked from. Yes, the evaporation makes condensation. It affects condensation, but condensation also affects evaporation in the opposite. If condensation increases, then the evaporation should decrease. Actually, these are the flows, but if we think on the units of stocks, if one flow makes another stock increase.
Yeah, but no, I have to disagree.
Mm-hmm.
I got to get you to hear.
Yes.
When water flows this way by condensation into clouds, some is subtracted from here by that flow, and added to there by that flow, it's one flow.
Yes.
It's that flow. There's not a feedback loop there. There's simply a flow.
If you make a flow look like a causal relation, each flow consists of two causal relations.
No, it doesn't. I'm sorry. You're going to have to rethink. You're going to have to talk with people. A flow is simply a flow. It's, I've got a bucket of water here, and I've got a pan of water on the floor, and I'm pouring water out of the bucket onto the floor.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
When you do this, so when the material in clouds increases, that increase just decreases the water in atmosphere, and that decrease also has an effect on
you're not believing me, are you?
I'm thinking.
Well, I hesitate to say this because you're a very nice guy, but you're thinking badly. There is not a feedback loop in there. It's simply water flowing in a pipe.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's all that's going on. There's no causal influence happening in that picture.
Okay. I tried.
So you got to go back. Actually, get a pitcher and a glass, beer preferably.
Mm-hmm.
Pour from the pitcher of beer into the glass. There's not a feedback loop there. It's just the beer is leaving one thing and going into the other thing.
Okay.
And in fact, the reason normally I don't come down quite so hard on people and say, no, you're just plain wrong, is that if you add causal feedback to try to explain the fact that water is just being transferred, you're going to complicate reality. Reality isn't doing that. Reality is just pouring. That's all it's doing.
Well, you can say any causal relation except the forces, the same thing. Except the forces. Physical forces, four of them.
I'm sorry, I'm not with you there. You and I will have to talk about this.
Okay,
Why don't we set up a time?
Okay.
All right.
Okay, my turn again.
Yep.
So this is from Allison Rodriguez. She says, thank you for your presentation. I am applying a precipitatory dynamic system through a workshop to understand the implementation of electric buses. But I am doing CLDs separated by dimensions: financial, political, technological. Is this viable, or do I need only one CLD?
My first problem is that when people do participatory mapping or modeling workshops, you need two skills, maybe three. One, you need skill facilitating a bunch of people talking. That doesn't have anything to do with system dynamics. That's, can you facilitate a group of people staying focused on a problem? If you're then going to add feedback thinking, you have to be an expert causal loop mapper. And if, in fact, you're going to build a formal model, you have to be an expert modeler. You can't just walk into the room and say, words and arrows, how tough can they be? Let's talk. You can't do that. So, and in fact, if you think about it, suppose you went into a room by yourself or with a few of these friends, and you said, hi, let's talk about this topic. And everybody starts talking. You'd have the problem of mapping but you wouldn't have necessarily the problem of facilitating. If you add to it the problem of facilitating, so half your attention is on that little old lady in the back of the room or that young boy in the front who says something really smart and everybody ignores them, then you have to worry about that. Your attention goes away from the map to the group. So I'd say don't use participatory methods until you've gained a lot of experience yourself, sketching maps that you think help you think, and sketching maps with your friends that help them think about things. When you've done that, then I think you're probably ready to try this with a few friends in a participatory setting. I'm scared about people who haven't facilitated groups and people who haven't built good maps that they like and tell stories from, that they're going to try to combine both these hard tasks into an absolutely impossible task. Is that okay? That's a kind of negative response. Although it's a direction to go in, I would say back off from the participatory part, get a small group together and try this. Try the mapping part. See how that goes, where you don't have to worry about whether the group is going to, by the way, I've been in facilitating groups where some quiet person has said the key smart thing and the group ignores that quiet person. And the reason for facilitation is so you can prevent that insight from being lost. And that means you got to be paying attention. When we have done this kind of work, we've had two of us in the room. I'm sorry if that puts a damper on your goal. And do I see the picture of the person who?
The person is not in the room anymore, I don't think. So they will end up
That's what happens when you give a sufficiently negative answer. Okay, I'm out of here.
Well, I don't think they exited the room. I think because we're going long, they are just no longer here. I believe, oh, there are no other hands up. Okay. Ed says, to me personally, I should tell people if they're emailing you from this particular talk, I should identify a label for them to use in their email, and that we should share emails among all the participants. I'm not sure that I can share emails among all the participants without their permission.
I think that's a problem. People who write to me are doing that deliberately. I will write back to that individual. I may say, right, is it okay if I send it to everybody else?
Right, okay.
Could I suggest that, maybe ask people to opt in to sharing? Because what I'm hearing a lot of really interesting questions throughout here that if they're going to ask you a question, I'd like, if it's okay with them, I'm not suggesting that we betray any confidences, but I would just like to be a part of the conversation if other people bring up questions, if it's okay with them. So how that happens, I'm not sure, but George, you mentioned that you would answer questions from 165 people if that came up. I'd be really interested in 100 of those. And not that they, I mean, that's an incredible resource for future discussion, future thinking, and so on, to the extent that it can be, that it's possible.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it at that. I mean,
we do have the emails of everyone. We could send out an email to everyone saying, If you want to make your email public to this group, you can tell us. We could do that. But George, that's a huge commitment that's starting with inviting everyone to communicate with you. That's
why I'm ending with all these negative responses. I figure I'm going to just dampen enthusiasm, and no one will email me for fear that I'm going to tell them they're doing something nutty.
You know, there's a lot in the chat. There's a lot in the chat that are good suggestions from people who have been in this business for a while. And I can't talk about all that, but I think that's another thing we should publicize is the chat, just for the information that's in the chat.
Actually, you don't have to publicize it. People can just list it and print it out. You can do it yourself.
You mean right now?
Anytime. I think this stays, right? But do it now. Just say select all and print it in Word and you're done.
Yeah, I've actually done that before as well. But there are only 20 people left. So I just kind of, for those of you who are still here, you can do that.
I don't see anything that tells me how to select all and print.
I think it's the little icon at the bottom that looks like a piece of paper. I think it saves the chat to a file.
Yeah, it says file.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
Yep. There you go.
Well, I can publish the chat file if you'd like with the recording.
There's no need to. People can get it themselves. They just go to the bottom of the chat, click on that thing, and it comes to their computer.
Mm-hmm.
Why make it hard?
I'm trying to look for more questions as there are no other people with their hands out up.
Well, maybe we should all say we have exhausted ourselves and
okay. I'm
oh, that's an upload. Sorry about that.
Scrolling through. Is there anyone else who has a question who's here? How about if you email George, we start with question from starting on right foot for SD modeling as a topic. So question from starting on right foot for SD modeling could be in the subject line so he knows it's from this particular group. And I guess that unless there are other people who are not needing to ask questions, I guess we can call this the end of the meeting. George, you've given me like 3 possible topics for having you talk again for us. I think this really elevates our position in the System Dynamics Society to have you speak for us, but I hate to lose what you can provide us from your exceptionally long background and your ability to speak to us in a way that we can understand. It's just amazing. So I thank you for this.
I wouldn't have offered if I wasn't willing to do it. And what you guys are doing is very important to me. I am about to become 83. So I don't have a lot of years remaining to talk about this stuff. And you guys are the people who will bring it to the next generation of young people. It's very important to me. And it was very important to Jay, as you probably knew.
Yes, I know. And Kim, I think that this should be part of every high school mathematics class, algebra, pre-calculus, and calculus, and I know we can do it. Just exactly what George said as far as bringing this to the entire high school population. And you ought to see some of the things that the Turkish group is doing at the elementary school level that's just amazing. So I think we have a good start. And I think those of us who have drunk the Kool-Aid are definitely continuing to work on this. I can't get the dad blasted chat to save. So
there's a
Diana.
dot at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, I can't. Oh, I did the paper.
Click on dot and it will say
yeah.
save chat.
Save chat. Okay. Yes. Okay. Good. Thank you all. Thank you, George. Listening to you is one of my favorite things always.
I think one of my favorite things is going to be discussing with Emory.
He has
some serious
question,
differences, and
well,
out of those will come good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Hey,
there's something more behind his questions because he's really quite a good modeler. So there must be some miscommunication there because he has some pretty good skill. So I'm hoping the two of you will communicate. Len, did you ask?
Yeah, no, I wanted
maybe
everybody.
You didn't get it. I was talking in Turkish, Emory. Did you realize?
I'd like to know, everybody use the reactions button, thumbs up if you'll be in Chicago at the conference.
Where is it? I'm trying to do that.
See it down at the bottom, reactions?
Yeah, I see it. I'm
George
going.
will be there, you'll be there.
My son will be there too, but he had to get off because he had to teach.
Oh, Richard was on and then left. Okay,
good.
Great.
Great.
Hope to see you there.
Kim, are you in Turkey?
No.
Yes, no, I'm in Massachusetts.
I'm just sitting near the near Emre, so my microphone is closed.
Ulkum is in Turkey, but Kim is, I think, in the United States. She said Massachusetts.
Well, yeah, I knew Kim was there. It was the U umlaut L K-E-M.
Ulkum. Ulkum.
Ulkum.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you all.
We can thank you all very much, and you especially, George, and Emory. I guess you can stop the recording.
Okay.